Red flags to slow down. What?
The checker flag is waiting.
I can see our Checkered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
Five Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
Fresh off the back of qualifying for the Mexico City Grand Prix, it is just done and dusted, and at the end of it all, it's Carlos Sainz who starts on pole position for Ferrari. Alongside him on the front row will be Max Verstappen, ahead of Lando Norris in third, Leclerc and Russell the top five. Calling all the action alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, is the McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, as we now dive into what we just saw in qualifying. You know what? Let's start with second and third, Sam, on the grid. It's 1v1, really. It's Verstappen versus Norris. And on this occasion, Verstappen got the better of him in qualifying. Were you a bit surprised by that?
I was. I mean, we were speaking prior to qualifying, and we were all saying that we expected Lando Norris to be on pole for this one. But he didn't have it all his own way. I've got to say, we'll speak about the pole sitter in a minute, but Max Verstappen is able to do things that other drivers just can't. He didn't look anywhere near the top three earlier on today, and yesterday he had a dismal day. So for him to extract that lap time out of the car just highlights just how good he really is.
It certainly is. Well, I'll tell you what, let's hear from Max Verstappen, our championship leader, qualified in second place.
Hey Max, well, considering how bad yesterday were, you a little bit surprised to be on the front row today?
Yeah, I mean, after yesterday I knew that it was going to be a tough weekend, especially also FP3 was not particularly great. But yeah, we kept making little improvements to the car, and qualifying felt better. I mean, of course, we're still not the most competitive, but to be on the front row is, I think, an incredible result if you look back at yesterday.
How much do you think you are chasing it with the car at the minute, and how difficult do you think that might make it tomorrow afternoon?
I mean, if you don't do a Friday, then yeah, a lot. Especially with the competition being so strong. You know, you want every possible minute that you can have. So yeah, the long runs, I don't honestly have no clue. It's very difficult to tell.
So Verstappen then, Andrew, will start on the front row ahead of Lando Norris, but it's a long run down to turn one, and we know how Verstappen races. What are your thoughts going into turn one after this qualifying? Verstappen getting the better of Norris, even though Norris has seemed quicker over qualifying.
Well, the start is going to be something to see, Harry. You've got Sainz on pole, then followed by the two title contenders and Charles Leclerc, who won in Austin last weekend. The guy who's been on third on the grid has won this race 4 of the last 5 years, and that's because partially the run down to the first corner is so long and the slipstream effect is so powerful. So, and then the other context for that is that there was a big debate in the drivers' briefing on Friday evening about the racing rules as a result of the controversy around the Norris-Verstappen incident in Austin. And the FIA have agreed that they're going to revise the racing guidelines. That's going to be, they're going to present the new ideas to the drivers in Qatar in 3 races' time, I should say. But the question is, given they've all had that conversation, they've fundamentally agreed a principle moving forward, even though the rules haven't changed. Will they be interpreted differently? Can Verstappen get away with the sort of driving he did in Austin, you know, the chuck it up the inside and take both people off the track strategy, basically, of defence? That's an extra dimension that's added to the excitement going into the race tomorrow.
What's interesting as well is that we saw in practice earlier on the weekend Lando Norris doing a practice start and driving all the way down the inside, braking right close to the apex, just seeing how tight and how close he can get that line in through to turn one. So it is going to be a fascinating battle. But in qualifying, at least, it was Verstappen who ended up ahead of Lando Norris. Let's hear from third place man Lando Norris.
Hey Lando, considering you were first in the first parts of qualifying, you a little bit disappointed or reasonably happy with how today went?
No, happy. I mean, I expected you to say that. I expected people to say that. I put in some very nice laps, Q1 and Q2. And that was pretty much it. Like I found the limit of the car very quickly, and we just didn't have much more left, whereas clearly the Ferrari had a lot more left in the bag than we did. So, no, of course, a little glimmer of hope in the middle that maybe they started to struggle with something, but clearly not. And yeah, I think we ended where we probably deserved to be. I think with a slightly better lap, could have been ahead of Max, but I just didn't manage to do it in the end, and I'm still happy with P3.
I know the race is always a different ball game, but it sounds like you got the most out of the car today. It must give you a lot of confidence tomorrow that you're at one with the car, at least with the package.
Yeah, but Ferrari's a big chunk ahead of us today. They have been the whole weekend, so they've been good in low fuel, like we saw in Austin. They're extremely quick in high fuel, and it doesn't give me a lot of confidence to beat them, but to beat the rest is definitely my target and definitely possible.
So Norris third then. It's by no means at the end of the world. It will be, though, like I said, 1v1, because Norris won't have any kind of backup in the form of Oscar Piastri. Piastri was knocked out in Q1. Do you think that will be a bit of a blow for Norris?
I think so. Seeing, him speaking after qualifying, he looked a little bit disappointed that he doesn't have a wingman to help him. He's going up against two Ferraris and Max Verstappen and potentially two Mercedes, but flip a coin as to whether they'll be good tomorrow or no good tomorrow. It makes his life more tricky, let's put it that way. He's got the pace to go and win this race, but it would be nice if he had some support.
Andrew, was that a bit of a bizarre qualifying when it came to sort of the tyre performances and the way in which some were able to improve quite massively in the final runs and for instance, Lando Norris and McLaren not able to have as big of a rate of improvement? We saw evolution quite high as well in the early stages, and we even saw the medium tyres come out in Q1.
Well, it's a tricky kind of circuit, low grip, low air density because of the altitude, over 2,000 metres high. And I think what you just saw basically was just a bunch of different drivers facing a bunch of different circumstances. So Oscar Piastri, for example, both he and Lando Norris started the Q1 on the medium tyre. Piastri didn't find any confidence with it at all, whereas Norris obviously did. Norris said that he found the limit of the car very quickly and couldn't really go any faster. Verstappen was coming into qualifying after basically just 1 hour's of practice this morning and was building through it. Carlos Sainz looked in great form all weekend, and he built on that through qualifying with two absolutely stupendous laps. Both of his laps in Q3 were good enough for pole, whereas Charles Leclerc was saying he's never had confidence in the car, and that might be partly because he didn't run in Q1 because Ollie Behrman had the car. So, there's a whole bunch of different things all coming together there. Meanwhile, the fastest Mercedes driver, George Russell, is the guy who crashed yesterday in practice. So, it's that kind of circuit, and it's set up a really interesting race. As Sam says, two Ferraris against one McLaren, one Red Bull. They're both in the same boat, Verstappen and Norris. The difference is that Verstappen doesn't need any help because he's got such a big lead in the championship. Norris needs all the help he can get. And I think Norris's big fear going into the race is just how quick Ferrari have looked. Their race pace has been really strong for the last few races, and now they've qualified at the front as well. Leclerc was just saying in his interview that I've just listened to that he was the fastest on the race runs, in the race simulation runs that have been happening this weekend. He's starting fourth, which is not great for him, and it's always really hard in Mexico if you're behind, because you want clear air even more at this track than you want in another track because of the high altitude, which means that overheating is a problem for the brakes and the engine, so clear air is a massive benefit. So that's why getting to the first corner, out of the first corner first, is so important. But I think most people expect the two Ferraris will be the quickest cars in the race. How that shapes up over the race distance with two title contenders in the middle of them, I mean, it's just mouth-watering, Harry.
It's going to be a tantalising prospect, isn't it? Well, the title protagonists start second and third, and it is a sizable gap. 57 points separate them in the championship, so this really is a crucial weekend for Lando Norris. He needs to take as many points as he can off Max Verstappen. But, of course, as you mentioned there, it was two fantastic laps, Sam, for Carlos Sainz. Both would have been good for pole position, his sixth career pole position, as he has a bit of a fond farewell in these final 5 races with Ferrari. That will be a proper boost for him, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's driven superbly this weekend. Can you remember earlier this year there were rumours, of course everybody knew that Lewis Hamilton would be joining Ferrari next year, so effectively Carlos Sainz was out of a job. So the rumour was swirling around that, well, Carlos Sainz is going to go to Red Bull. I guarantee you that Red Bull would love to have a driver as quick as Carlos Sainz in their car right now, because at the moment, as it stands with the grid lined up for tomorrow, Red Bull, by the end of the weekend, could be third in the constructors.
Carlos Sainz was just talking about this in the drivers' press conference, not the Constructors' Championship, but how he feels about the fact that Ferrari coming on form just as he's leaving. And it sounds like it's a really bittersweet experience, a bit like a girlfriend who you love very much breaking up with you and you're thinking about what might have been. He was saying that, he feels like Ferrari are going to be in title contention next year, and he feels like he's been a big part of building the team into that position, and now Lewis Hamilton gets his car. So, yeah, jilted Carlos Sainz, not a happy man.
It's a cruel world we live in, isn't it? Well, you know what, let's hear from Carlos Sainz speaking in the pen after quali.
Carlos, not one, but 2 incredible laps out there. Just how satisfying was it to get the job done today and have such a massive gap over everyone else?
Yeah, very good. Also because the gap is to 2 or 3 very fast guys in quali, and to put 2 laps that are so good and so far ahead is definitely shows how good the laps were and putting everything together. Normally in Mexico, I struggle to put laps together because of how slippery it is, and you always may have the feeling like you never put a lap together, but today I definitely put two really good laps.
You've been strong all weekend long, the race pace looks good. What have you got to do to stay in P1 tomorrow?
Just a good launch, and even a good launch sometimes is not enough in Mexico, so I'm also realistic and knowing that tomorrow anything can happen into turn 1. At the same time, I have less to lose than everyone around me, and I'm going to do the best I can to give that P1 into turn 3, turn 1, 2, 3, and then lead from there.
It is a cruel twist of fate, isn't it, Sam? Sainz will go to Williams next year, where no matter how much James Vowles talks a good game, I don't think we're expecting a massive leap forward and Williams to be challenging for poles and wins quite yet in 2025. So it will be a readjustment for him. But how do you, as a driver, then almost reset your mind? You're still in the hunt for the win. Is he just going race by race now? Because he's going to want one more win before he bows out at least.
Oh, yeah, and he's fully capable of doing that. I say I feel sorry for him. I mean, he's racing in Formula 1 for Ferrari. I don't feel that sorry for him.
Never feel sorry for a Formula 1 driver. That's rule number 1.
I don't feel sorry for him. Carlos, I don't feel sorry for you. But I do know he deserves to keep his drive for next year. But on pace and on what he's been able to achieve this year, I think he's done enough to keep his seat. The only problem is that Lewis Hamilton came on the market. Now, if Lewis Hamilton comes on the market, yeah, you kind of got to go, well, what can you do? But he's doing a really good job. He really is.
And actually, it's rare that we see Sainz getting the better of Charles Leclerc, and actually I know Leclerc had his own problems, that hasn't felt comfortable all weekend, but that's the other thing, Sainz has been on it actually pretty much from the start, and it's only it's now 12-8 in qualifying to Charles Leclerc, and historically over their time together Leclerc has had a couple of tenths in it over 1 lap pace with Carlos Sainz, so it's always a pretty good feat, and Sainz is feeling strong when he is out qualifying Charles Leclerc. So it will be an interesting battle, particularly, as you say, just 8 points separating Red Bull and Ferrari for second in the Constructors. So that fight is going to be one to watch with interest throughout the race.
It is interesting that this actually, in terms of qualifying, in terms of the average pace difference between Leclerc and Sainz, this has been the closest of the 4 years they've been together. There's only 400 separating them over the course of the season so far. And
wow.
That's not including today's data, so that might even shift a bit. That's going to shift even more towards Sainz's favour. That's Leclerc ahead, by the way, 400ths at the moment, or going into this weekend. I haven't put the numbers into my spreadsheet for this weekend, but 3/10 could skew that, even though it's over 20-something races or whatever it is now.
So just as Ferrari are coming on and Sainz is coming on form.
So you do have to really feel for him. He's done a really good job this year. In a normal circumstance, as Sam said, he does not deserve to lose his seat. No way. And he certainly doesn't deserve to go from a top 3 car to a Williams, even though Williams are improving, as we saw. Well, I was going to say, give me the chance to get a caveat in there.
No, it's just the way you just
straight in there.
No, it's just the way that you said it.
Birdie's straight in there with the criticisms. No, because what I was about to say was, even though Miss Williams are improving, as we saw with Alex Albon qualifying in the top 10 today, but it is Lewis Hamilton. And what's Fred Vasseur and John Elkann, the Ferrari chairman, going to do? Lewis Hamilton turns up in November, December last year and says, hey guys, I quite fancy a red car. And they're like, all right, Lewis. They're not going to go, no, we'll keep Carlos Sainz, are they? Even though on the form of this year, there's no reason to replace him.
Certainly is. Still remember that fantastic win earlier in the season in Melbourne, coming back from that appendix removal. Just what a rollercoaster ride it's been for Carlos Sainz. He'll be hoping he can convert his pole position into the win. We shall see. It could be Ferrari's first win in Mexico since 1990. I think you mentioned that in the podcast previewing the weekend. Was that Alain Prost?
Alain Prost from 13th on the grid, actually. That was probably Alain Prost's greatest win, I think, in my opinion, out of the 51 that he got. So there you go.
I'll tell you, he starts 13th for this Grand Prix.
I would not bet against the Ferrari win tomorrow, I can tell you that right now.
Alonso starting 13th, though, for this one. I'm not sure he's quite going to make it up for the win from there.
No.
400th Grand Prix for Grand Prix start for Fernando Alonso as well, but qualifying was a little bit miserable for him. So it is Carlos Sainz on pole ahead of Verstappen and Norris. Charles Leclerc rounding out the top four. The two Mercedes of Russell and Hamilton in 5th and 6th. For Mercedes, Sam, it's been a bit of a weird weekend for them as well. It just seems like seems like a decent recovery for them, actually, from what's been a bit of an up and down, well, pace-wise since Austin.
But again, every weekend, what are we going to get from them? Are we going to get some pace? Normally, we get a practice session that shows a bit of promise, followed by potential disappointment in qualifying, and maybe they rescue something in the race. Or it's always a mixed bag. They never have a weekend where it's just relentless pace. Or they haven't recently. They had that form earlier on in the season, and since the summer break, it's kind of gone a bit awry again. And for no apparent reason. What's the problem? They don't know. What are the car characteristics? Well, it's bouncing around at the rear, but the front's not biting, and then it's very snappy. It just seems difficult to drive, really, really challenging. And we've seen a lot of mistakes from the Mercedes drivers.
I mean, Sam summed it up.
Sorry, I thought you were about to speak.
No, I wasn't. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, fair play to Russell. As he was just saying, the car, that the bits that he's got in his car, it's his own fault because he stacked it in qualifying in Austin a week ago. But they're 12 races old, and that might not sound very much, but bits on Formula 1 cars deteriorate, and you lose performance as a result. So he's out-qualified Hamilton again. He's absolutely wiped the floor with Hamilton. And just to go back to Ferrari for a minute, in terms of qualifying anyway, in races, Hamilton is still brilliant. But it just in terms of going back to Ferrari for a minute, Hamilton's qualifying form this year against Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari next year, he's got a job on his hands there.
2025 is going to be so interesting, isn't it? But we've got still to get through the rest of 2024. Outside of the top 10, a couple of big names to fall in Q1. Sam, we already sort of mentioned Oscar Piastri. That kind of leaves Lando Norris really just on his own. No possibility of any help from him. Piastri's just not able to click with the car. We know he's quicker than that. He's got more pace, showed it in practice. And Sergio Perez out in 18th in qualifying in his home Grand Prix. But I think, as Andrew said in the coverage, as sort of a collective sigh from everybody when you see that, especially at his home Grand Prix, when you look at the pace gap, it's actually not that much of a surprise.
No, when we spoke about that earlier, and Andrew kind of laid it out, it does make sense. And 0.8 is, if he's having problems with the front locking and he's not comfortable with the front end, he's always half a second off. Another 0.3, it's about right. But it's just too big a gap for the team that has been the dominant team in Formula One to have one driver that is consistently half a second quicker than the other. It's too much of a gap. And I think they're being found out now, and it's going to come and bite them this year, because I don't see them winning the constructors. Will they win the drivers? Probably. It's not done yet, but probably. But they won't win the constructors this year, and I think that'll be that's the realization that they now need to make a change.
The way Ferrari are going, the Red Bull might not even be second in the constructors, and if you'd said that at the beginning of the year, people would have thought you were mad.
Well, if you'd said that after 10 races of this season, they were miles ahead after 6, 8, 10 races. You thought Red Bull, they've probably got both of them in the bag, and how things have changed.
Well, I suppose the one saving grace when you look at the constructors is they've got one McLaren starting way down as well, so they've only got a 40-point advantage. Piastri just ahead, but just on Perez, we'll hear from him in a moment. But is this the fourth nail in the coffin for Checo?
I don't know. He's got 9 lives, that guy. You know.
Well, fair play to him. He's clung on.
Yeah, he could have lost his drive, this summer. He could have lost his drive last summer. He didn't, and but I think they gave him. They've more or less admitted, the bosses of Red Bull, that they gave him the new contract in May. It was he signed it in the hope that it would give him the confidence to build on his performances, but it's had almost like the opposite effect. And he admitted on Thursday that he's had a terrible season. Well, now he's had a terrible weekend so far. And so, look, I haven't got a crystal ball. I don't know. Sorry, that's David Coulthard's phrase, really, not mine. But I don't know what's going to happen. And they are in a sticky situation because Max Verstappen is so good. You know that pretty much anyone you put in the car, out of the choices they've got, is going to be nowhere near him. But they've made their own bed. They could have had Carlos Sainz, but they chose not to have him. Got to question that decision.
I just feel like, well, you know what? Let's hear from Sergio first after being knocked out in Q1.
Into the low speed, I cannot brake, I cannot stop the car. As soon as I attack the braking, I start sliding. So that is definitely my main issue at the moment. Is where I'm struggling the most, and I think here it showed even more. Every time I try to attack the braking, I'm just locking up.
How much did it hurt that obviously you had that performance? Every time you were out on track, the crowd would cheer and you just weren't able to deliver?
No, it's obviously the worst place for it to happen. It's super disappointed. But I still, there is 4 races to go, and I really want to we have to get on top of it as a team, and I hope tomorrow we can enter to the points. But it's going to be a very difficult weekend.
So Perez there obviously was quite dejected, especially on the radio after that. But, for all the talk about who could slot in alongside Max Verstappen, Red Bull put themselves in a really difficult position, I think, Sam, don't they? Because they obviously want someone quick, but you don't want anybody that is going to upset the status quo of that team where Verstappen is their man. And actually, when you're looking at your Liam Lawson's, your Tsunodis, your Isaac Hadjars, your Ayumu Iwasas, are they actually going to do any better than Sergio Perez?
See, I believe that Liam Lawson would eventually become a headache for Max Verstappen. I really do. I really do. Andrew might think a little bit differently. You might think a little bit differently. But I think he's a very talented driver, and I think given a bit of time he'll chip away and get quite close to Max. He's not going to get on Max's pace, I don't think, but he'll get close.
Well, you speak of Tsunoda there. He actually binned it at the end of Q2, caused a red flag, and that kind of prevented Lawson and Alonso from getting in their flying laps. So the 2 RBs just on the outskirts of the top 10 at the end. But I mean, Andrew, that seat's a poison chalice, and it has been for the last five years. Forever.
Yeah, because Max Verstappen is that good. I mean, that's the problem they've got. And when the car is as dominant as it was in 2022 and 2023, or when the fields are spread out as it was in 2021, it doesn't matter that the second driver is half a second slower than the first driver. But the field's not that spread out anymore, and he is. So, it's difficult for them. Just on Fernando Alonso, by the way, in his 400th Grand Prix weekend, it's not his 400th Grand Prix start, the 3 that he missed. He was actually quite positive after qualifying. The Tsunoda thing kind of did him over. He said the car felt much better than he was expecting. He wasn't thinking it was going to be a good qualifying, but he reckoned he could have got into the top 10. So I mean, it's all it's not a race win that he's lost out on. So he's not exactly too disappointed, but he thinks he might be able to mount some kind of comeback in this race to make it a bit special for him and get a couple of points.
Well, that would be a nice celebration for Fernando Alonso. I tell you who will need a comeback as well, though, along with Perez, is Oscar Piastri, who, as I mentioned, starts just ahead of him. But is it fair to say, Andrew, that kind of since that Baku win for Piastri, has there been a bit of a drop-off?
There definitely has, and I don't really understand why, because through the summer in Europe, Norris was always the quicker driver. Piastri's not out-qualified Norris since Monaco. right? That's how much Norris has been the quicker McLaren driver. But through the European summer, it was very, very close. Think back to Hungary, they were side by side on the front row, fractions of a second between them, fractions of a tenth of a second between them, if I remember rightly. Piastri got the start, won the race. Then he beat Norris in Spa, partly because of Norris making a mistake on the first lap. Then he did that brilliant qualified again alongside him on the front row in Monza. Overtook him with that brilliant move around the outside of turn 2, which the team should arguably have never allowed happen, but they did, and there you are. And he finished ahead of Norris in Monza. Then Baku, he goes well again, but Norris was out of the picture because of the problem with the yellow flags in qualifying. He won that, Piastri, with a brilliant overtake on Charles Leclerc. Singapore and Austin have not gone well. He qualified 5th in Singapore, never had confidence in the car. Again, Austin knocked out in Q1. Really bizarre, scrappy first session. Again, now Mexico, knocked out in Q1, scrappy first session. Sometimes these things just happen, and it's only 3 races, 2.5 races, because Singapore wasn't that bad. But it is a bit strange, because he's a very solid driver. One of the things that people were saying about Oscar Piastri was that, he's got some of the qualities, it appears, that Lando Norris hasn't always demonstrated. That sort of naked racing instinct, for example, that he demonstrated on Monza. Some people have been arguing that Norris could do with a bit of that himself. The mental solidity at starts and things. Some people have been arguing. I'm not making the criticism myself. I'm just reflecting points of view that people have made. Norris could have done with some of that himself, but it's the last 2 races, it's kind of fallen apart a bit, and he sounded a bit dejected about it this afternoon.
He certainly did. I mean, Sam, we've seen a lot of drivers talk about how how much these cars are always on the ragged edge, and they can change quite quickly from almost session to session. Do you think that might be something to do with Piastri's kind of up and down performances?
Honestly, I think we've just seen 2 mistakes in 2 weekends. I think that's it. I don't think anybody should really read too much into it. Yeah, he had 2 bad sessions in 2 weekends. Okay, he's 21 years old, 22 years old. He's still got the world at his feet. He's still touted as one of the best young drivers in Formula One. 2 disappointing qualifying sessions. I'm sure that he'll bounce back. That's my opinion anyway.
22. Born in 2001, the 6th of April.
15 years younger than me.
We'll edit that bit out, don't you worry. Well, he will have a bit of a mission on his hands over 71 laps. But we'll see. Lando Norris came from 19th to 5th this time last year in the McLaren, so let's see what happens. But it will be on pole position, Carlos Sainz, with Max Verstappen starting alongside Lando Norris 3rd. Who's going to win this one then, gents? Andrew? Ponders, long
tricky
pause.
One, really.
It is a tricky one, this, isn't it?
Yeah,
you sounded like the sorting hat from Harry Potter then. Tricky, very tricky.
A Ferrari driver.
Oh, come on. We've got to get off the fence.
Sainz.
Carlos Sainz.
No, I'm going to change.
Leclerc.
Yeah.
Okay, Leclerc from Benson. Bird.
I'm going to be really neutral here, and I'm going to go for Lando Norris.
Do you know, I'll just say, ladies and gentlemen, he's not actually wearing his McLaren t-shirt this weekend.
Well, you haven't seen what's under my hoodie.
I haven't, that's right, yeah, but he might as well be.
So you're going for Lando Norris wins.
I am.
I'm going to go Carlos Sainz win, but finally, will Lando Norris close the gap to Max Verstappen?
Well, if he wins, yeah.
He'll close the gap, but not by anywhere near enough, will be my prediction.
Okay.
But then again, it could be like debris flying at the first corner, and then who knows what's going to happen then.
Well, there will be a lot to watch out for ahead of the Mexico City Grand Prix. Do join us for it. We'll be calling all the action. We'll be live on 5 Live from 7:45 with the race start at 8 o'clock in the evening UK time. Sainz on pole, Verstappen alongside with second place man in the championship, Lando Norris, right behind him. Do join us for it. Thank you, Andrew Benson. Thank you, Sam Bird. I've been Harry Benjamin. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.